Mississippi, Gerard Gibert, Middays, Rhino in the studio. Joining us now, Secretary of State Michael Watson. Good afternoon there, Mr. Secretary.
Good afternoon, my friend from Knoxville County, Mississippi.
Well, I knew you were out and about today. It's election day across the state. We got a couple of special elections in the Senate. We've got some municipal elections as well. So I know you were on with Paul this morning. Give us an update. How's it going?
Yeah, so we've been in several precincts so far. Started in Tupelo this morning, working our way down to Meridian. So we'll be in 10 to 15 precincts in between the two, making sure that Mississippians understand they've got an active Secretary of State. We're in the precincts, making sure those laws are being followed. So we've seen some trickling in of voters in a couple of precincts and some steady in others. So it's a little bit of a mix so far, but we're excited to be out here and seeing the voters and seeing the poll workers. And as we've talked before, it's so important for them, and I just take the time to make sure I look them in the eyes and say thank you. Without them, we would not have elections here in Mississippi, so we have to have our poll managers, and I appreciate what they do.
Yeah, absolutely. So have there been any reports of any sorts of issues, irregularities that your office had to get involved in to this point?
We've had a couple of phone calls, nothing too big, I don't believe. This morning, for instance, there was a real small one in Tupelo. A guy came in, the precinct we were in, and was in the wrong precinct. So, issues like that we hear from time to time, but hopefully we won't have anything too bad pop up. And again, we've got great weather where we are, so I'm hoping the rest of the state seeing the same, and people are getting out to vote. As you know, this local elections are very important.
No doubt. And the polls, when do they close today?
Yeah, so we'll be open until 7 p.m. today, and if you're in line by 7 p.m., you will be allowed to vote. So I've been telling people, if you're not sure you need to go vote, call your circuit clerk, call your elections commissioners, call folks that are your local elected officials and ask them. Obviously, you can go to our website, y'allvote.ms, and find some information on elections as well. But it's important to talk to your local election officials here in Mississippi. Obviously, we're a bottom-up state, and so they do the large majority of the work in elections.
Yeah. Secretary Watson, what does your office do in preparation for an election day such as this? How do you coordinate and work with the counties, the cities, the precincts, and so forth?
It starts a long time in advance, Gerard, and we could talk anything about training. What we do with our poll workers, they're trained at the local level, but what we do with our circuit clerks and our elections commissioners, the training starts many months in advance. We have questions from the local elected officials as well. Hey, let's look at this issue in Sims, or let's look at voter rolls over here, or different things. What does the law say about this? So we're advising through the process. But at the end of the day, those elections are handled at the local level. So they make those decisions. We just try to advise them to the best of our ability, make sure they understand what the law says. And then SIMS, obviously, we oversee the statewide election management system. So that's an important component, obviously. And so we're going to give and take, but at the local levels where the hard work happens.
And so the statewide election management system as well that you have access to and operate, you're responsible for operating that, overseeing that, correct? Administering the system.
So we oversee it, make sure everything is running smoothly, but your circuit clerks and really your elections commissioners are the ones that did the heavy load of work there. It's, making sure that folks are completely properly enrolled or properly voting in our elections here in Mississippi. Voter roll maintenance is something we talk about quite a bit. So that's something that's in SIMS that our commissioners do. But yeah, they handle most of the work in that system.
Yeah. And speaking of voter rolls, I know that, I've talked about it before on the program as well, that you have pushed hard for some legislation that would allow your office to work with the circuit clerks to get them cleaned up. We still have issues there, do we not?
We do, and that's obviously our elections commissioners are the ones that are at the tip of that spear. And as you know, today there is actually a cloture vote on, I think it's HR 4. So you talk about the importance of voter roll maintenance, and people need to know this. We have zero statutory authority dealing with voter roll maintenance in Mississippi. We rely on federal law. So if something was to pass at the federal level that changed that, Mississippi obviously would be susceptible to that and would have not a leg to stand on if we wanted to argue some type of 10th Amendment or some other issues where states should be the ones determining what our election law should be.
Yeah, and you have share the statistics again, if you would, Mr. Secretary, about some things that I think were mind-boggling with respect to obvious inconsistencies and just irregularities and invalidities, shall we say, on the voter rolls. Tell us about that again.
Yeah, I'll try to slim that up. But when we got started, there were 43 of the 82 counties that had more than 90% of their voting age population on the registered voter rolls. We had 7 counties that had more than 100% of the voting age population on the registered voter rolls. Now, that's impossible. That means that people that are have gone on to receive their heavenly rewards, or the other way, have are still remaining on the voter rolls. Folks who don't live here anymore are still in voter rolls. Folks who lived in other parts of the state are still in voter rolls in the north part of the state or south part of the state,
Yeah.
depending on where they moved. And so what we started was basically a very aggressive campaign to talk to our elections officials at the local level, our commissioners, say, look, we need you to do your job. Sent letters out to every one of those 43 counties and said, hey, we're watching. We're going to be paying close attention to what you're doing. Voter roll maintenance is incredibly important. We put numbers up on our website so people can go now and look and see in their counties, hey, how are they doing? And so when somebody looks at it, we like to say somewhere around 80%, depending on, the county, the situation, if it's a very transient type county or not. But that's probably a pretty good baseline number for folks to shoot at. Now, since then, we're in the low 20s that are now over 90%, and only 2 that are over 100%. Unfortunately, one of those 2, it was at 107%, is now at 109%. So they're going the wrong
Hmm.
way.
Hmm.
But we have made some progress, and we'll continue to plug away at that as much as possible.
And it should be stated that it doesn't assure any sort of fraud or irregularity. It just opens the door for it. It makes it more doable.
That's exactly right, and this is the baseline though. You've got to have the parameters. Hey, who are the folks that should be voting in Mississippi? And you're right, there can be errors, and that's part of it. But the
Yeah.
cleaner we can get it, the easier it is for us to operate.
Yeah, absolutely. So we got the session coming up in 2022. What's on your radar of needs for your office that you're talking to the legislature about?
Look, we could talk about a whole lot of things, Gerard, but our focus is clearly on voter integrity, making sure that our system is clean here in Mississippi. And you've heard me say this before. I've said it around the state. I think Mississippi had a really good election in 2020. Were there some issues, small issues? Sure. And we've talked to district attorneys around the state and are actively going after those issues that we saw. So people say, well, look, if it was so good in Mississippi, then why are you advocating for more changes? We can never rest on our laurels. We've always got to move
Yeah.
forward. And one of the things with voter roll maintenance that we continue to talk about, we talk about making sure only United States citizens are voting in our elections. One of the big things we've talked about of late is, you see this around the country, this discussion about election audits, post-election audits. Mississippi has zero statutory authority to do any kind of post-election audit, so we're working on that. And then lastly, we talk about deplatforming of candidates on social media sites, Facebook, Twitter, you name it. And you and I have had this conversation quite a bit. It's easy to get reactive and mad and want to go do something. But we got to remember, let's take a step back. We're conservatives. How should a conservative view this, and how should a conservative draft a solution that's going to give us an answer to the problem? So that's going to be in the package as well. But again, making sure that our integrity is there, making sure that people can look at Mississippi's elections and say, you know what, I trust the process. I think they're doing the right thing there. That's important. So returning that voter confidence is something that we're going to continue to work on. And it starts with, again, voter roll maintenance. It's so important, but we'll talk about those other issues too.
Yeah, we got to keep pushing that issue. I honestly, I can't understand why anyone would object to that. No, we don't want the voter rolls to be accurate. I mean, that's kind of that's my interpretation of it. And I know there's always a concern about you may inadvertently delete somebody, but the way that you guys structured that, pretty low risk of that, honestly.
Well, plus, Gerard, if you understand the process here, when people say the word purge, they automatically think, well, Secretary Watson doesn't want people to vote. He's throwing them out in space. That's not the
Yeah,
case.
yeah,
All that purged is you're still on the roll. You're just listed in purge status. And if
yeah.
if someone was wrongfully purged, they can go challenge that, vote by affidavit ballot, so they still have the opportunity to vote.
just remedy for it. I mean, it's a no-brainer to me. We got to keep pushing it, and appreciate you championing it, Secretary Watson. And thanks for traveling around the state, watching out for the voting today. And always good to talk to you. We'll talk to you soon.
Look, we've got to have a good, fair election system, clean and safe, and that's what we're going to focus on.
Appreciate it. Secretary of State Michael Watson has been our guest. Middays, we'll be right back. We got foreigner tickets to give away. Stay with us.